Hello and welcome to the latest big game preview of the 2024 Autumn Nations Series as Felipe Contepone's Los Pumas come to town to take on an Irish team coming off a rare home loss. As you may have noticed, I am not Caelan. My name is Huw Griffin. I'm standing in for Caelan across the next 2 weeks. Joining me, I have two men with a rich knowledge of Irish rugby in David Cordial and Daniel Humphries. Welcome to the show, guys.
Cheers, mate. Good to be on.
Good to be here, Hugh.
Yeah, delighted to speak to you both. So we'll jump straight into it. The team has been announced today for Ireland playing Los Pumas. It's a 23, which sees only one change to the starting side, but I think the biggest conversation starters are on the bench with two new caps there as well. So in the backs, we've got Hugo Keenan. Mac Hansen is the only non-Leinster player. Gary Ringrose is now partnered by Robbie Henshaw, with Bundyaki dropping out of the 23 entirely. James Lowe on his customary wing. And then Jack Crowley. Oh, sorry. He's also not a Leinster player. Apologies. Jack Crowley from Munster and Jameson Gibson Park. And then in the forwards, we've got Andrew Porter, Ronan Kelleher, Tyg Furlong, Joe McCarthy, James Ryan, Tyg Byrne, Josh Mantafleur, and Caelan Doris, an unchanged forward eight. And then on the bench, Rob Herring is joined by Cian Healy and Tom Clarkson as the cover tight heads. And then we've got Ryan Bird comes in and Peter O'Mahony keeps his place on the bench. Craig Casey comes in for Conor Murray. Sam Prendergast replaces Cian Frawley. And then we've got Jamie Osborne in the 23 jersey. So, David, I guess start with that then. What catches your eye from that 23?
Yeah, well, going from if we start with the starting 15, it's a kind of a classic Andy Farrell call again, where a team that has slightly underperformed, he's decided to back again. He's not one to hang people out to dry or to crook guys too soon off the back of one bad performance. I think the only change there to the starting 15 is Robbie Henshaw coming for Bundy Aki. I don't know if we could characterize that as Aki being dropped so much as just kind of standard rotation. I wouldn't be surprised if that kind of thing was planned before last week's game was even played. Robbie Henshaw is he's a test line. He's got about as much experience playing at 12 for Leinster and Ireland as anyone could ever want. So I think that's a fairly reasonable call to make with the week we're going into now. The bench is definitely where the interesting stuff starts to happen. I think you could probably have a certain amount of sympathy for Kieran Frawley. He had a pretty
He had a tough
dog
day at the office.
day. He had a dog day off the bench there, particularly off the back of coming off the bench and winning it for Ireland against South Africa in the second test there. He came off the bench against the All Blacks and it just didn't work. And we all have bad days. I think if he's dropped for one match and comes back, that's probably fair enough. But I'd hate to see him not feature again soon. But I think it's probably a bigger story for the lads who are included. Sam Prendergast and Tom Clarkson making their potential Ireland debuts off the bench. Sam Prendergast has been in the order to join the squad for almost as long as he's been playing senior rugby. I don't know if even his most ardent fans would have thought he was going to get in this quickly, and against a team like Argentina, could be a serious test. So I think there'd be hope that he gets off the bench for more than the customary 5 minutes. And then Tom Clarkson, like as a Leinster fan, I've watched Tom play for years and years. I don't know that I ever saw him play in a green jersey off his first couple of seasons. He's a very solid tight head, workmanlike player, but up until the most recent season, I don't know that I necessarily thought he was going to play for Ireland. But we've gone deep based on injuries, and he's the man who's come in. And to be fair, this last season he's played incredibly well for Leinster. He's deputised very well for Tyg Furlong. Rabah Slimani was brought in to replace Michael Ala, and Clarkson has been keeping him out of team sheets, which is a testament to the way the young fella's been playing. And he's been scrummaging very well, which is an area that Ireland have been weak on in the past. So I think seeing the impact those two can make off the bench will be very big. Ryan Baird coming in for Ian Henderson is probably the other big switch. Henderson has a lot of credit with both Ireland, Ulster, and the Lions, and yeah, he probably hasn't been at his best lately. And seeing Ryan Baird deputise in as the replacement lock there is a very interesting one, because for the last few seasons he's kind of played in that kind of switch role between number six and at lock. But for Leinster for the most recent season, he's been favoured at lock, and now Andy Farrell has favoured them there too. So it'll be very interesting to
Could
see
it be that
how
Byrne moves forward, perhaps?
it could be. No, it could as easily be the Burn moves forward. That's a very, and like once again, that kind of speaks to the testimony. But it's just it'd be interesting for me to see, and maybe I'm just speaking as a Leinster fan who's seen Ryan Baird come off the bench at lock more often this season than we probably would have in previous seasons. Whether or not he does that again for Ireland, up in the air. He's as competent a six as he is a 4 or 5. But yeah, I think between those selections, it'd be very interesting to see how that goes. Um, and it'd be remiss of me not to mention that at number 17, Keane Healy is going to hopefully come off the bench and equal the all-time cap record for Ireland, along with Brian O'Driscoll.
Wow, fantastic. I didn't know that. I think with Baird, for me, when I think of him, I think of when you see him running in space, doing all the things that players that big aren't supposed to be able to do. But we'll come on to Argentina a little bit later. But I think if you see Ryan Baird doing that, it might suggest that Ireland have fallen into playing the kind of game that Argentina want to play. So, we'll discuss that. But Daniel, from your point of view, were you expecting to maybe see more changes to the starting 15 after what went on against the All Blacks?
I think David's right. I think in terms of, philosophies and stuff, Farrell, I think probably for the last 2 years, it's been an easy decision to not drop people because the team's been very successful. And so if it's going to be sort of your mantra that you back people, it would be very against everything that he has said for quite a long time to then suddenly make a big raft of changes. I actually think he has made sort of quite smart changes. And I think also as David kind of said, maybe apart from Frawley, who might feel like he's been dropped, other guys who have come out of the squad, maybe in Henderson as well, but Henderson probably couldn't complain if to not be in the squad. I think Henshaw coming back in, I have an opinion of Robbie Henshaw that he's probably one of the most gifted footballers Irish rugby's ever produced. He's just such a high quality of player. I could understand the guys who played last week, but it feels almost wrong when he's fit and available that he doesn't play in that Ireland team in some shape or form, doesn't play some sort of role. So I think that's a good switch. I also think the starting 15 weren't brilliant, but a massive thing when you're in the ground, I think, was that we hadn't played very well. But with, say when Frawley comes on, we were still in a good spot to win that game, despite not playing well. And the bench gave us like very little.
Mm.
It was one of the few times I've seen an Ireland bench sort of look like our team, like our performance dropped off, and it didn't feel like it had much further to go, if you know what I mean. I thought there has to be some sort of uptick here when the guys come on, and there was very little. There was a lot more errors. There was a lot more issues. So I think the changes in the bench were needed, and probably you could have picked that bench last week. I mean, obviously Clarkson, is kind of a, Bealham and O'Toole both kind of fall out of the team. I think probably both, well, O'Toole obviously a HIA, probably a head injury, and I think Bealham, to be fair, probably, wrecked after what he gave, 78 minutes or whatever. So apart from that, that bench could well have gone last week, and I think it makes sense that the guys who made impact, like Peter Manny, keep their place. I know Peter gave 10 minutes, but you could tell that there was he was trying to sort of bring a bit more. So no, I'm not that surprised by the changes. I suppose my only questions around it would be like how long, I think as we just said there, how long are you gonna give Casey and Prendergast? Are they kind of just rotational and then they get these sort of obligatory have 5 minutes at the end there, lads? Or are they legitimately, we're gonna bring them on with like we did last week with Frawley, with 20 minutes to go, you're gonna bring something to the game. Um and I also suppose the other question I have around it was, what is Jimmy Osborne's role on that bench? Is he sort of cursed to be an injury cover guy? Some of these guys, like I think Ian Madigan springs to mind for me, these kind of guys who had loads of caps but could never get into teams because, but they're better on the bench because they covered the positions. I'd like to see Osborne actually have a fixed role in coming off the bench because I think he's that good. Like if it means Hugo Keenan comes off, I think Irish fans will go fair enough. But at least that's a role rather than, oh, we'll just wait and see which one of the backs gets injured and then Jamie will replace him. So I think that's probably my view of it, is that I think it's fair enough. You stick to your guns. It was a bad, you're going to pencil it down as a bad day at the office and we'll come back better this time. and then we'll make some sort of small changes for guys who could otherwise have been in the squad anyway last week. Robbie Henshaw could well have started at 12, and he may well have, had a better game, or may have influenced the game better. So I'm a big fan of the Henshaw move, and I'm a fan that we made changes on the bench because these younger guys, they're not really younger guys anymore. Baird and Casey are entering
Yeah.
their prime years, and it's time to, I think, to be fair, to give them a proper role in the squad and not just be carrying tackle packs.
Yeah, 100%. So David, on the nine situation with Casey replacing Conor Murray, at Munster level, it feels like Casey has displaced Conor Murray now, uh, which is understandable based on where they are in their careers. Would we have expected to see Craig Casey get more game time for Ireland by now? Do you think? What's your opinion on that?
I think there's a couple of layers to that. It's an interesting one where, like, obviously Conor Murray is obviously at the tail end of his career now, but it's important to remember that at the height of his powers, the man was probably the best nine in the world. Casey, I think if he suffers from anything at the moment, is that he's probably quite similar, if not a little bit too similar to Jameson Gibson Park, in that they're both small, nippy, fast, quick passing nines. So if at 60 minutes, 65 minutes, you want to switch things up, you want to close the game out. Conor Murray is probably a better foil for Gibson Park than Casey is because they're a little bit too similar. But just on provincial form, Casey is fairly ahead of Murray. I think one of his weaknesses used to be his box kicking. He wasn't always the most effective at that. He was more quick off the back of a ruck and a quick passer, but he's filled that hole now. So I don't think it's that much of a surprise that he's now taken that bench spot in this second test. I mean, important to remember as well, he started the first test against South Africa
Hmm.
over the summer. So would I expect him to get more game time? Possibly, if it wasn't the fact that he's playing at nine at the same time as Jameson Gibson Park and Conor Murray. It's kind of the same thing as Darren Cave playing a lot of rugby at the same time as Brian O'Driscoll. There's only so many minutes you're going to get when that's the competition you're up against. Casey's asset in this is going to be that he's much younger than both Gibson Park and Murray, and when both of them are retired, he's probably, unless somebody else steps into that gap to challenge him, he's probably going to be Ireland's starting line.
I
Yeah.
suppose just to jump a wee bit on that point, I actually think that Casey will. I think people are keen to see him, but I think he will benefit from this sort of scrum half room that he's in now, like that he has been in for 2 or 3 years. Because as you say, the time will come when Gibson Park moves on, when Murray has moved on, and he will benefit so much from having been in this really experienced group, learning from them. Whereas by comparison, I think, as you were saying, not many people expected Sam Prendergast to get an Ireland go this early, but it almost feels slightly out of like we're a bit worried about the 10 thing. Um, I back Sam Prendergast to go well on Saturday. I don't think it's like beyond his means to play really well in an international test match, but obviously I think if Ireland were to have the dream scenario, he would be learning and playing maybe a game against lesser opposition. I mean, it's still a test match. Obviously, someone like Fiji next week would be the kind of game he would debut in, and he would learn.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing with Casey. It looks like it's a nice progression for him to start to come into the team now. Whereas then you'd be worried on the 10 front is that it almost looks kind of like we don't really know who's going to be the guy. And someone like Frawley, as you said, he's 25 minutes of bad rugby between him kicking a drop goal to beat the world champions and he doesn't play this week. So if the
Yeah, that's
10
crazy.
thing, yeah, exactly. So the 10 thing feels more like it's not frantic because they're international coaches, they know what they're doing, but to fans it would look more like, oh, like we've know that Frawley guy's done, give this guy a go. Whereas the nine situation, I think you could be quite happy with it because Casey's getting good minutes, but he's
Mm.
also learning from two, well, like maybe Ireland's best ever scrum half, and as you say, outside of maybe Antoine Dupont, who's this complete exception, the best nine in the world. So yeah, it's an interesting one because I think Casey's in a good spot, but I think you can then compare that with the tens, and it looks like a very different situation.
Yeah, that's such a great point. David, you're obviously the Leinster fan. It feels like Leinster's 10 situation is very much in flux at the moment with Ross Byrne, people maybe thinking maybe he's not quite filling Sexton's boots at the moment. And then you've got Frawley's getting the odd game there, Prendergast. You got Harryburn as well. At one point was the exciting new thing. For people who maybe don't follow provincial rugby that closely, maybe just Ireland fans, what can they expect from Sam Prendergast? What makes him such an exciting prospect?
Well, that is essence, and not to sound like a complete cliche, but he's a very instinctive player. He's just kind of particularly when he was at the under 20s level, you could see that there's an element of he's just going to go for it. He's a big player. He's as tall as his brother Keane, who plays in the back row for Connacht and for Ireland. Actually, now he's in the squad too. So even though Keane is probably a bit more filled out than Sam is, they are the same height. They're well over 6 foot. So he's a big player. He's strong, even though he's quite light. And anyone who watched him at under 20s level would know he has an almost R.A. Snyman
Mm,
inclination for offload. So he's he's a very confrontational 10. He's not a big 10 in terms of defense or in terms of rucking. It's something I've noticed as a fan of him that on more than one occasions I've seen the ball sitting comfortably at the back of an opposition ruck and he's staring at going, I'm not going for that. But he's in terms of his ability to carry to the line and draw the last defender before a pass, he is that kind of confrontational player. He's probably as close to a Johnny Sexton stand-in as we're going to find, except that Johnny Sexton wasn't where Sam Prendergast is at his age. And Johnny's probably a bit angrier. Sam, if you watch him play, particularly, it's always nice to watch players. And it's one of my favorite things about going to live matches is when you can watch players off the ball and see how they are when they're not in the center of play. It's a very interesting insight into how they watch and structure the game. Sam is a very languid player. He's not casual, but he's easygoing. He's going to take it as it comes. He's not 6 degrees of paying attention to what everyone else is. He's not the guy who's going to give out to Hugo Keenan for giving the wrong pass, even if it leads to a try. He's not that
mm.
kind of player, but he is as instinctive as a Johnny Sexton. So, I think he in the Leinster context, it's kind of a weird situation where Ross Byrne has been in situ for probably almost a decade at this stage as Johnny Sexton's understudy, and then in the last 2 years as the incumbent. Kieran Frawley is kind of the very much the coming force, both from Leinster, from an Ireland perspective, almost more than a Leinster perspective. But it does, and Harry Byrne, as you said yourself, has been an exciting kind of undercurrent to the whole thing. But there is this feeling that since Sam Prendergast has come on the scene, it's just kind of a waiting until he is big enough to fill the shoes that are kind of waiting there for him to step into. Whether or not he actually does, because we've been down this road before. We've seen players who people think this guy is going to be the guy. I remember going to see Harry Byrne's first game for Ireland when he was capped against the United States and thinking this is going to be like going to see Dan Carter the first time he ever played. Didn't pan out that way. So you could definitely big players up a bit too much and it can fall flat through not necessarily any fault of the player themselves. But that's definitely the kind of vibe that's been hanging around Sam Prendergast, both for Leinster and for Ireland. So how it goes over the next few years and whether or not the likes of Jack Curley are already feeling him nipping at their heels, it's kind of a wait and see. But it's definitely an exciting time.
I think just that point about the sort of the languid player, it's really un-Irish as fly halves go. We don't produce these guys. And I think with Sam Prendergast, the moment you watch him at under 20s, as you were saying, or you watched him play, I watched him play, as you were sort of saying, live twice last year, once in the RDS and like the sideways rain against Ulster. And then I watched him play, came off the bench in that quarterfinal. And in both games, it's the feeling of it's like watching like a Kiwi 10. It's quite
Mm.
like it's so like natural to him. Like he does things because, as you say, that's how he views the game. He seems I'm sure he's coachable, but like you wouldn't almost want to coach him too much. Whereas I feel like Irish tens, like Johnny Sexton, wants to learn from every single coach what he could learn. And I think the other problem that we'll probably have as like an Irish fan is that we'll always go, what is he like Johnny? Like, is he as good as Johnny? Does he do it like Johnny? Why doesn't he do it like? And I think we'll always do that because he was the best fly half we ever had. And I think actually what we should hope for from Prendergast is, does he fit the system of Andy Farrell? because Andy Farrell's system is beautifully structured, but it's structured. It's structured, with almost within an inch of its life. And it's so good to see that because it gives our attack so much. But you really hope that Sam Prendergast is sort of given a bit of the license in Test match rugby to do what he would like to do. Because I feel like if you try and shoebox a guy like that, it won't suit him. And I think like if anyone wants to see how just phenomenally talented he is, like there was last year against Ulster, he chipped and chased the ball and then volleyed it to someone else while on the run. So if you want to look up the TikTok of that to anyone who hasn't watched him play,
Yeah.
that will show you how supremely talented this boy is. And as you say, it feels like since under 20s we've been
Yeah.
saying it's a matter of time here. It just matters when it happens. It doesn't matter sort of if. But that's the thing. I think then everyone gets a wee bit worried about the debut and like. But I think he'll go really, really well in international rugby. I think he's got a huge, huge future. But it does feel like it's a very early time to get your debut. But some of the best players in Irish rugby history have got their debuts very early. So I really hope it goes well. But I think he'll be great to watch, whatever happens.
Yeah. I don't know whether it's just the haircut and the cheekbones, but it reminds me of Manny Labok a little bit.
Yeah,
So
there's
I'm definitely looking forward
the
to it.
shape of him as well,
Yeah.
100%. Yeah, yeah.
Another player, last one on the Ireland selection then that I was half expecting to see, especially with the debate around the impact of the bench, was Cormac Isachuku. So if we're not going to see him this week, and Daniel, when are we going to see him, and why do you think he hasn't been picked in this lineup this weekend?
I would say that first of all, I think Argentina are a really top team. And it's probably again to most rugby fans, they are a team that we normally beat at home. We had 2015 in the World Cup quarterfinal, but everyone kind of thinks of that as, it wasn't really them. It was more like we were injured and we didn't really show up or something. I think Andy Farrell will go, I would rather my test veteran out there with Ryan Baird coming off the bench, like so your Peter O'Mahony, and I think it is that foil thing. You want your Ryan Baird, but having Ryan Baird and Cormac Isachuku is like having two of the same guy, and they're both kind of equally not that experienced, especially around line out time. I think if you're gonna, they picked
Mm,
Temps last week, in my view, for set piece. That's the only reason I could see it. And then I think then it'd be the wrong decision to go Henderson and O'Mahony off the bench and bring in two guys, neither of which say has run a line out in a test match before. I think that's probably the view, is that you couldn't do both, but Baird was kind of the next one up. So I think it was either Isachukwu for Henderson or Baird for Henderson, and they've picked Baird, and I think that's a fair decision. So I think you will see Cormac Isachukwu feature. Most likely he could be involved against Fiji. He could be involved in the next game, depending on how that goes. But I think it's the right decision because putting two guys in there, giving them less of a chance to succeed. I think whoever got into the squad alongside O'Mahony has a better chance to succeed, and I think that's intelligent selection. I just think it would have been wrong to pick them both because I think it's about the structure of your set piece, and I think we'll come on to how important the set piece will be.
yeah, absolutely. So before we go any further, I'd just like to remind everybody that if you are liking what you are seeing and you're hearing, please do subscribe for unrivaled coverage of Ireland's Autumn Nation Series endeavours. If you can comment and leave a review, that massively helps also. And as it's November, you can support Kaylin's Movember Challenge for supporting charities for mental health, all of which will be linked down below. I can say that Kaylin's YouTube channel is massively undersubscribed, considering the consistency of the quality of the output that he puts out there. So definitely, if you're not there already, give him a subscribe, get him to 1,000, help him get monetized, and covering the costs of making these podcasts. Okay, moving on to the opposition then with Argentina. So they have selected a team which I'm not sure has got any changes to it from the team that beat Italy. So they've gone for Juan Cruz Malia at fullback, Rodrigo Isgro on the wing. Then you've got Lucio Cinti and Mateus Moroni in the centres. Still no Chocobaras, who picked up an injury against the Springboks in the summer. Then you've got Bautista Delgi on the other wing. Tomas Albanoz and Gonzalo Bertrand, who make up the halfback pairing. And then into the forwards, we've got Benetton's Thomas Gajo. Julian Montoya comes in to start as captain. Joel Sclavi is on the tight heads. Then you've got Guido Petty and Pedro Rubiolo. In the second row, Pablo Matera is the big name return into the starting lineup, and you've got Juan Martin Gonzalez and Joaquin Oviedo make up the rest of the back row. And then on the bench, you've got Ignacio Ruiz, Ignacio Calles, Francisco Gomez Cordella, Franco Molina, Santiago Grondola, Gonzalo Garcia, Santiago Carreras, who wears 22, and Justo Picardo makes up the 23. So, David, what names stand out to you from that Argentina team? What player do you think, God, I hope he doesn't get the ball very much?
Out of that team, I mean, it's got to be that back line, and it's notable that as bad looking as that back line is, it's not even got Connacht's new star boy Cordero in there. So no, I mean, this is going to be a game where if they can get it out to the likes of Malia, who I think is their vice captain on the day, Albornoz at 10, like those two lads are going to cause a lot of trouble. It's I think the result of the last game that Argentina played, I think they put 50 over across Italy.
Yeah,
That's
50
that's the kind of
honestly.
story that's the kind of scoreline you don't even usually see in the Six Nations. So, for whatever people might think of Italy, and Italy have been a lot stronger in the last few years than they've been in times gone by. This Argentina's team still managed to well and truly put them to the sword. Something that I took away from as a positive from the last Ireland game against the All Blacks, despite our loss, was that in 80 minutes of rugby we only conceded a single try to them. This Argentina team is a team that likes to score and likes to score a lot. And I think if this match turns into a shooting gallery with the likes of Juan Cruz Malia running riot, that's going to be a bad day for Ireland, because unless we massively turn around our attack, I don't know if we're going to be able to match them on that front. But if they manage to get it out wide, if they manage to get it out to the likes of Malia, if they get it out to the likes of Isgro, I think on the wing there, then those boys are going to cause Ireland a lot of headaches if we can't shut it down the way we did it against the All Blacks.
Yeah, shutting down is definitely the word that I would use. It's such a fascinating clash of styles between these two teams that I think is going to make it such an intriguing contest. Where do you think, Daniel, that Argentina can target Ireland? Where do you think their point of difference, their advantages that they have, if there are any?
And yeah, I think as we were sort of saying there as well, that our team, Felipe Contepomi obviously coaching them, so that'll be a name obviously that a lot of people in Ireland will be very aware of. He coaches this team exactly how he played. There is a structure, there's an idea of what the shape is, but they live on errors. And like if you watch that Italy game, the scoreline looks really, really rough on Italy, but they had plenty of ball. They had their set
Yeah,
piece looked quite good.
they
Their
have. If
maul
you
was
look
quite
at their
strong.
stats compared to other nations that played last weekend, they look like the best in several
Yeah.
metrics. It's just the
And
scoreline that was the
and this
problem.
and this Argentina team like to a T. If you watch them, they beat the All Blacks, they beat the Springboks, and they absolutely hammered the Wallabies in that rugby championship. Those three games, I rewatched the All Blacks game in Wellington because I thought it was an interesting comparison. That All Blacks team really isn't that different from the one we played. And the real difference was they leak tries occasionally, so they do, but the moment that the All Blacks made an error, it was capitalized on. And the All Blacks didn't make many in that game. But every knock on, they just turn it on. And if Ireland made 21 handling errors last week, I know we were saying like fair play to them, they made some great tackles, sort of last stitch efforts. There was real effort in defense. This Argentina team will put more points than 20, they'll put more than 23 points on you if you make 21 handling errors, because that they prefer that. They would prefer 21 handling errors than, if you gave them a sort of a scrum to go after, that they want the ball in play. I think if we were talking about, particular standout names, I know we're obviously, but like Juan Cruz Malia is right up there as one of the best
Yeah,
fullbacks that's played this
yeah,
year. I mean,
absolutely. I think he could be if they would. I think they do the nominations for World Player of the Year quite early, but I think he might be a sneaky outside
like
shout for a nomination.
really genuinely. I mean, if you watch him in that All Blacks game, he is sensational. I think someone that we should be delighted that is not playing is Mateo Carreras. He's electric on the left wing. So not having him and Shaka Barris as well, those are two guys that were massive in the rugby championship. But equally, these guys that come in, um, is it 12 Mateus Moroni?
Yeah.
He he's veteran. Like you'll probably know his name from World Cups gone by. Like he's played a lot of rugby. He will definitely know what he's doing in that team. I think the other area that, for example, I think that we do need to pay attention to is like their scrum is good. I think Sclavi reminds me of like a young Tag Furlong. That was the moment I watched him in that rugby championship. It was like watching a 25-year-old Tag come on the scene. He is a monstrous ball carrier, but also like his set piece work is really good. And they got change out of him. And I think something that if we were gonna, put the Ireland comparisons on, Ireland would need to have a massive look at how they're doing kickoffs and restarts by comparison to, with the New Zealand game. We were sending Hugo Keenan after every kickoff, every restart, and he was getting no change out of that. And if you're gonna kick badly, leaving yourself with no fullback. This Argentina team don't kick a lot, but when they kick deep and into space. And that's when then they want you to kick it back to them. Like much like France actually, I think it's probably taken from France a wee bit, is that then when they kick it back to them, it's a broken field. And that's all they want. They just want broken field scenarios and they create them for themselves. And so I think that's an area they will go after us in, is not kicking a lot, but when they do kick, it's so that we kick it back to them.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, their theory of how rugby works is you create as many broken field scenarios as you can, then you capitalize on those broken field scenarios. I think Cinti at outside centre is a massive issue for us. I think like this Ireland backline will have a real handful. But I suppose where we could get the change from them is if your set piece is buttoned up. If you watch them play in South Africa and when you watch them play the All Blacks the second time, both times the opposition tightened up their set piece and they went after them with mauls and scrums and they kept the handling errors really down and they look like sort of toothless in attack because they aren't getting the situations that they want to see.
Mm.
So I think there's it's Ireland a year ago were all these things. The set piece was very tight. The sort of handling errors were at like as low as they could be. And Argentina would hate playing against that. But I think the Ireland team that played last week is Argentina's dream scenario. So that's probably where the Argentines will look to get after us, I think, is in broken field. But it's how they achieve that will be how Ireland are thinking about it this week, I think.
Yeah, but perfectly summed up, I think. The like I was saying, the difference in styles and those situations that Argentina want. Sevens is such a vital pathway for the Argentinians, not just in producing players, but also for informing how they play.
Mm-hmm.
And it's such a contrast that Ireland want as many rucks, as many phases as possible. Argentina want as few as possible. So
Mm-hmm.
it's all about who gets to have their way. And like you say, if you don't give them any errors, if you say, okay, here's our defensive line, you have the ball, try and break us down. That's not what they're interested in. That's not what they're trying to do. They want to get those transitions going. So I can't wait to watch this personally. David, if you could pick one Ireland player to have a 10 out of 10 performance against Argentina, who would you pick?
Jack Crowley.
Jack Crowley.
Yeah. But that one of the things we were really missing against the All Blacks was direction. And it's something that Crowley at Munster's best when they were winning the URC 2 years ago. At his best with Ireland, say in that first game against France in Marseille, it's Jack Crowley, unfortunately. Unfortunately, sorry, that's true. It's a Leinster attitude there. No, fortunately, when he plays, I don't want us to be entirely dependent on a 10 again. There's a podcast I listened to recently where they made the good point that not every other country relies on having a directional 10. Other countries can just rely on having players across the back line, even in the forward pack, who can take responsibility for the attack and for how we're going to approach a game. But I think if this Ireland team is going to win this game and win it well, then Jack Crowley needs to have a really good day, really, really good game. And if he comes off at 60 minutes or if he goes to full 80, I think for us to come away from this with the kind of result that we're going to want and kind of now need after losing the last game against the All Blacks, Crowley has to have a really good game. And I think
Yeah.
he will. I don't think he's going to, particularly at test level anyway, with Ireland. I don't think there's an Ireland team that backs up bad performances with another bad performance,
Mm.
and I don't think Jack Riley at test level is going to back up well, not a bad performance, but not a great performance with another not great performance. So there's one player I think needs to have a really good game. It's probably him.
Cool. Okay, it's prediction time then, gents. So who do you see winning it? Why and by how many? Daniel, you first.
Um, I was actually because I've been thinking about this a lot. You obviously, presume like we hadn't lost however many games at home for the All Blacks, and so I think it's a massive ask for Argentina, like for any team to come and beat us there. I do still think that this Argentina team though, this is their first massive game as Autumn Internationals, and they're coming off the back of a rugby championship they could well have won. And I think they are one of the few teams in world rugby that don't feel like they're rebuilding. They feel like they're almost nearing their sort of
Which is
peak.
amazing because they got a new coach.
Yeah, which is incredible. I mean, it feels like a very fast year in Argentine rugby, but obviously the talent must just sort of it's always there with Argentina, but it's constantly unlocking it, I suppose. Um, I think Ireland will win, but I think it's going to be very tight. And I think, as we've sort of pointed out, if we let it get into this sort of shootout where these sevens guys come into it, we would lose that. We would lose that game. I think someone we hadn't really mentioned yet, but I think it just came into my head because of the sevens was Rodrigo
Yep.
Isco, who made his debut in international rugby just on the sevens point before he had played it was his first senior professional game in 15 rugby. These guys are freak shows. Like they are so good when you give them broken balls. So I think the short answer is I think we will win narrowly, but there is 100% in my eye this poses a bigger threat in lots of ways now. I say we an Ireland team off the back of a tough loss than the All Blacks to me did. When I was looking at it last Thursday, I'm more worried about the Argentines than I was about the All Blacks. So yeah, I think Ireland win narrowly, but I think it's, as you say, it's going to be an incredible clash of two styles. And if Argentina bring what they have, it's going to be it's going to be very, very difficult for Ireland to contain them.
Yeah. David, how about yourself?
Um, I think are we going for predictions yet or
Yeah,
just
predictions.
yeah. I mean I think I would back up with a lot of what Daniel said there. If this turns into a shootout, we're gonna lose. Um, because I don't think our attack is quite where it needs to be for that kind of fight. I don't think that's going to happen. I think the team that managed to keep out the All Blacks for 68 minutes of a game and only let them in once, and even when they let them in once, it was Will Jordan, who's like a human cheat code when it comes to scoring tries. I don't think it's going to happen. That being said, I think things might loosen up a little bit. So I think Ireland will come out on top, but I think it'll be tight. I don't think. I know we're not really going for them in an Autumn Nation series. I don't think either team is going to be in try bonus point territory. I my guess for this game would be I think it'll finish around 20, I'd say 24-15 to Ireland. We'll win just about by a score or two. I think Argentina are probably good for one, maybe two tries. Um, and I think that's probably the most likely. If it opens up more than that and more tries start getting scored, I think we'll be in trouble because I think that their team is a lot more capable of scoring a lot of tries than ours is. If we're
Mm.
going to win this, it's gonna be through defense.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think the bookies had it at 7 points. They were 7 point favorites. I do honestly think that's just home. That's just the home advantage, isn't it? You get a point swing for
Yeah,
being home.
Yeah.
I think
The one
that's
thing that
that.
you can, sorry, the one thing that you can say about Argentina is that while you're saying, Ireland don't back up a bad performance with a bad performance, Argentina so far this year have been backing up a great performance with an awful performance. They are
Yeah,
very, they're like the classic French cliche of you don't know which Argentina you're going to get. And I
yeah,
think that a lot of that is because of their game plan. The game either goes that way or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, then they just look lost. They look like they're not going to get anything going. So I kind of see I would almost go for a more extreme version of what you guys are saying of I think the team that wins this will win it by 12, but it's about which way does the game go? Because the game is going to pan out in a way that really suits one team and doesn't suit the other at all. And it's a question of which way
Yeah.
round is that. So I can see this being a gap on the scoreline, and it will either, if Argentina win it, it will be something like 35-27 or something like that. I know that's not 12, but or it will be 21-13 or something like that if Ireland win it. So I completely agree with what you guys are saying, and like I've said a few times now, I can't wait to watch it. But we'll leave it at that, folks. Thanks to Daniel and to David for joining me tonight. If you're going to Dublin, enjoy it, but if not, you can tune into Virgin Media One and TNT Sport with the kickoff once again at 8:10 on a Friday evening. We will be back on Sunday with our review of the game before turning the attention to Fiji next week. So thanks at home to everyone for listening. If you like what you hear and see, please do like and subscribe or leave a review. And you can find all applicable links down below. For now, cheers, David. Cheers, Daniel. Thanks for coming on. Appreciate it. And speak to you next time. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks, Huw.